Hi everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Product Development Podcast. This episode with Chris Clinton was originally recorded back in May 2023 as audio only, but due to demand, I've put these episodes onto YouTube, and in the future you'll also start seeing some video formats of the sessions themselves. So if you do like the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this in the future. It's really appreciated, and I hope you enjoyed this interview with Chris Clinton of Naq Cyber. Welcome to the Product Development Podcast. In this episode, I speak with Chris Clinton, co-founder of Naq Cyber, which looks to protect and empower SMEs through a one-stop automatic cybersecurity and GDPR compliance platform, who was previously a NATO contracted cybersecurity engineer and a cybersecurity consultant at a number of large defense companies, including BAE Systems and Kinetic. Chris, many thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you very much.
I'm really excited to talk to you because you're a subject matter expert on all things cybersecurity and you've co-founded a product itself. So I'm keen to dig into that a bit deeper later on. But starting from the fundamentals, how would you break down cybersecurity into its constituent parts?
Cybersecurity. Well, the interesting thing about cybersecurity is the term cybersecurity is pretty meaningless. So if nobody can actually define what the word cyber means, the best example I've heard is computery security. But anyone in the profession really describes themselves as information security people. So it's always in infosec. And then that's really the best way of thinking about it. So what we're looking for is securing information. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's not just IT security. It's a big aspect in 2023, of course, the major aspect, but it also then brings in other factors such as physical security and training and that sort of thing. So to get a bit more in detail about what cybersecurity is protecting the information or protecting the impact of the breach of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. CIA triad. So confidentiality, think about it like a bank account, is I don't want anyone knowing my bank balance. Integrity is I don't want anybody to be able to modify my bank balance. Availability is I want to be able to withdraw cash when I go to an ATM. And that's basically all we're doing. And that is the fundamental tenet of cybersecurity. And I think it's very easy to get caught up in a lot of the buzzwords and a lot of the fancy trends around cybersecurity, because what most security salespeople won't tell you, especially if they're selling very expensive firewalls and monitoring systems, is that 99% of cyber attacks or breaches of information security occur due to it's a very nerdy thing to say, the chair keyboard interface, the person in the middle, right? So, and that's usually somebody doing something accidental or malicious. We heard the term insider threat. And the only way to mitigate that is training and awareness. And the major way to protect yourself as an organization is through legal policies. So, i.e., if they keep doing the thing you've told them not to do, you can fire them because they've signed something that says, I won't do this. But obviously, before we get there, training and awareness is the most important part of any cybersecurity program. But it's very, very easy to jump straight into that technical IT security cool stuff, the Mr. Robot stuff, because that's really cool, right? But the example I always give, there's very few technical solutions available that can stop somebody leaving their laptop unlocked in Starbucks in the middle of London. And that is the biggest risk to an organization, not APTs and 0 days and all that sort of stuff, is somebody doing something that they've been told they shouldn't do. And that's really where it all starts.
There's a technical side, there's the platform side, obviously, in terms of securing your database and your servers and et cetera, et cetera. But it sounds like fundamentally the biggest issues that you see is actually just the person, the people, in terms of whether they maybe click on a phishing email or something like that, or leave the laptop, as you said, open in a Starbucks, or is that the biggest risk you think actually?
It's the single biggest risk. Yeah, it's 1, 2, and 3, because I've worked with a number of incidents across my career, both from small organizations to larger organizations who shall remain nameless. And 100% of them start with somebody doing something they shouldn't do. Even when you're looking at incredibly sophisticated cyber attacks, right? Whether it's like Stuxnet in, it's nuclear power stations or Heartbleed, all this stuff. The reason these attacks happen is through human error. So examples are somebody puts a USB stick into a machine they shouldn't. Somebody clicks on an email they shouldn't. Somebody forgets to update a server or update their computer. Somebody leaves their laptop unlocked. Somebody uses the same password for all their services, doesn't enable two-factor authentication on their email account. And the truth is, when you walk around a big show like InfoSec, which is in London next month, you have all these big fancy tools costing billions across the industry. All of them are basically to deal with the consequence of somebody doing something they shouldn't. Because if everybody did everything they should do, and also cybersecurity, it's really easy, right? It's really obvious, right? Update your computers. Don't use the same password, right? We keep saying exactly the same thing over and over again, right? And in your day job, Adam, we use our platform, right? And you see exactly every day, turn on 2FA, use a different password, don't click on dodgy emails, don't leave your laptop unlocked, don't allow your family to play Fortnite on your work laptop, all that sort of stuff, right? Don't torrent stuff on your machine, all this stuff. If nobody did any of that, I wouldn't have a job and the industry wouldn't exist. And so that's the most important part, is don't just jump straight into a technical measure, because it often gives you a false sense of security. I always when it comes to cybersecurity, I always talk about cars and automotive security. Just because you've got ceramic brakes doesn't mean you don't wear a seatbelt.
I mean, without, I guess, plugging your product too much at this point, what advice would you give to a business then who's maybe feels like, okay, we have some measures in place, but we probably aren't doing exactly what we should do. We're a bit sort of casual at some things. What's the first step that they should start thinking about?
Yeah, indeed. And that's really why I've dealt with Naq. We deal with smaller organisations, but as you said at the beginning, my main experience is dealing with government and enterprise organisations, and it all starts with exactly the same process: is understanding, and it's using that 7% at the beginning. Information security is the fundamental question you need to ask yourself: is what is the information I'm trying to protect, and what is the impact on my business if that information is breached, in a sense of confidentiality, integrity, availability? Am I willing to accept that risk? If not, what am I going to do to stop that risk? And that's literally what I've just described, the risk assessment, right? And every organization must do that, right? And we do it for other areas of our life. We do it for physical safety. So we have, alarm systems and CCTV. Look for fire safety. We have fire extinguishers and sprinklers and all that sort of stuff. Health and safety. So, we have the little yellow signs and eye wash stations, all this sort of stuff. And that all starts with risk assessment, right? And you need to do the same in information security. Don't just jump straight into, incredibly expensive endpoint protection software. Now, I used to see this all the time, especially with larger organizations, is they throw money at the problem, right? So they go and buy this super expensive subscription to monitoring tools or whatever. But then they've never actually updated their computers. And it's like, well, start with the basics. What am I trying to protect? What is the impact? And then work from there. And you'll actually solve, as I said, 90%, you'll mitigate 90% of that risk by doing very basic stuff.
So what does that risk assessment look like? If you're wanting to start that process, where is the first step there?
Yeah, so obviously not to plug our own product, but even beyond that, it doesn't, if you're a smaller organization, you can do it today, right? Just get a piece of paper and go, right, what do we do? And this is a key part of GDPR as well. And GDPR and cybersecurity are two sides of the same coin. What information does my business process? If you're an accountancy firm, for example, right? What data do we process? So we have my employees' information, so national insurance information, might have their passports, might have their CVs, their address. If we have a health system, a lot of people use mental health apps, mental health data, all that sort of stuff. And then for our customers, if I'm an accountancy, then I have financial records, bank statements, credit card statements, all that sort of stuff. Right? That's all the data we process. Then you look at all that, write it down, and go, what would happen if each of those things we process was compromised? What would be the impact to my business? How much would I care? Do I care if my marketing material is stolen? No, because it's on the internet anyway. Who cares? Would I care if somebody stole all of my customers' financial records? Absolutely. What's the impact to my business? I could go out of business. I could lose all my customers. I could get a fine from the ICO. I have to tell all my customers it's been stolen. I really don't want to do that. How can I mitigate against that? I can go, well, I can tell people to stop emailing around on their personal email accounts. I can turn on 2FA in Google Workspace or Office 365. I can set up some rules on Google Workspace that says alerts me when people start emailing out loads of files. I can probably enable the free antivirus on all of my Windows laptops and the firewall, all that sort of stuff. And all of that, as I said, is free. And you go, well, does that mitigate the risk to an acceptable level? If not, then you can look at other things. It all starts with telling my staff, we process this data. This is the impact to our business and to your livelihood as an employee if we go out of business. This is what I require of you to protect our business, our customers. And I think also from the awareness piece, that risk assessment is very important, because then it's one of the big problems in cybersecurity is people caring. So people are a bit, especially in larger organizations, you get all this incredibly boring training. You do it once a year, usually around Christmas, when you don't want to do any real work. And then it's just the same old cartoons over and over again. Why do I have to do this? Oh my word, this is so boring. But actually informing them this is the impact to, obviously when I was at places like NATO, I understood the impact quite clearly. But if you're in at McVitie's making chocolate biscuits, you're like, oh God, why do I care about this? But that risk assessment is key to explaining the impact to your employees, and then they will care more about the impact to a breach. But a risk assessment can be as easy or as complicated as you make it, but any form of risk assessment to then justify and think about what you need to implement is important.
Yeah, a really basic thing, I suppose, is passwords, which you've alluded to already. We have so many passwords; it's spilling all over the place in our daily lives. Hundreds potentially for some people, definitely myself. What is the best way to secure yourself there in terms of passwords, particularly in light of? Myself, I see things like LastPass, who I believe had a data breach or something similar on that side recently. And then you start thinking, well, these people who are meant to be securing our passwords are also potentially succumbing to cyber threats themselves. So how are you safe? Where are you safe?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, LastPass, obviously this is on the internet. So this is as an alleged data breach.
Alleged, I should say. Yeah.
That is still ongoing. Investigation is still ongoing, I believe. Yeah. But yeah, so absolutely, you should still use a passwords manager. Would I recommend using LastPass? Probably not. I've said that on LinkedIn before, and I think most security professionals would say that. Not that no organization is immune from cyber attacks, right? But if you do suffer a breach, it is important to be I think the best policy, what I recommend, is to be quite public about it and be quite open about what's happened and what we've done to stop it and the potential impact. And I think that's the biggest problem with LastPass, is not that they've suffered a breach. People get breached all the time, but was how it was a bit confusing, about the impact especially because a password manager is pretty important, right? But I still wouldn't dissuade anybody from using a password manager. And so even the National Cybersecurity Centre recommend the use of password managers, because the thing in cybersecurity, there's a bit of a fancy term called defense in depth, which basically means don't just rely on one thing to protect you. Do lots of small things, and in the aggregate, it'll protect you. Same with the car, right? You have brakes, you have seat belts, you have early warning systems now, and all that sort of stuff, right? You have multiple different ways to protect you. You don't just rely on one thing. Same cybersecurity. And the things, password managers, it is absolutely better to use a password manager than not to use a password manager. But when it comes to passwords, I would also say, and you're seeing a lot of, I think Google a couple of days ago released, I forgot what they call it, but passwordless authentication for Gmail, passkey, I think. The most important thing you can do is enable two-factor authentication. Any form of 2FA, even SMS codes, is critical. And most incidents I've dealt with could have been avoided with 2FA. And so 2FA is getting a 6-digit code on your mobile phone, or saying, yes, this is me trying to log in, or using a PIN code that's been sent to an SMS message, something like that. That's, if people are hearing this, did one thing that I would recommend is enforce two-factor authentication across your entire organization. And as this is a product development podcast, absolutely your development environments, your cloud environments like AWS Azure. So enforce two-factor authentication. And what I mean by enforce is do not allow people to log on. And if you see people logging on without 2FA, you kick them off until they have 2FA. It is so critical. Yeah, that's always use password manager, because then the reason being for that is use something strong and unique every time for each, because then if one website is compromised, then you don't have to then go around changing all your passwords for everything else.
Which, to be honest, I have actually experienced before, and it was part of my realization that sharing passwords is not a good idea when your WordPress or whatever it was I used at the time site got hacked, and realized it was shared with about 20 other logins, and I thought, okay, now's the time to grow up and stuff.
Also don't use WordPress. That's a quick and easy way to solve a lot of security problems. Use anything else.
So from what I've gathered so far, I think preparation is obviously a massive important theme in cybersecurity for an organization. Training, as you said, around the people, making sure that they understand what a good process looks like in terms of their own personal security, in terms of their systems they interact with, but also generally good practices, which frankly they can probably take into their own personal lives as well, not just in the business environment itself.
I mean, after COVID, the line between personal and work is blurred, right? So I get asked this question all the time: bring your own device. So people using their own kit for work purposes. And so what this means is everything you mentioned there has to apply to personal IT. And my advice there is, well, generally, don't allow people to use your own kit. But if some people want to, or you can't afford to buy stuff, is make sure that personal stuff is secured in the same way as you would your business stuff. And that's really important.
So let's say a company has gone through the risk assessment, they've applied the best practices, they've got people on board, people doing the training, they're following it, everything's working great. At that point, particularly for B2B companies, which I'd like to touch upon, I think accreditation is the wrong word, but certainly meeting certain certification standards or compliance standards, that's quite a good selling point in terms of getting clients on board, particularly government organizations, let's say, who maybe want, where Cyber Essentials is one. What are some others that people can look at trying to bring into their business for the sake of, if anything, getting more clients on board who feel like they're more trustworthy as an organization?
Yeah, indeed. I think certifications, IT certifications, are a funny old business, right? Because certifications are like insurance. It doesn't actually say anything most of the time. So the certificate, look, I run a business that sells certifications, right? So I'm not going to, I think they're great, obviously. But you have to ask yourself what is the purpose of getting a certification? And if it's to demonstrate trust, that's great, right? And I think what I would recommend for most B2B companies, certainly startups, once you've raised a bit of money, my usual approach is Cyber Essentials, which is the National Cybersecurity Centre run a scheme. And then there's another one called Cyber Essentials Plus. The Cyber Essentials Plus basically makes sure you're not lying in your Cyber Essentials application, which of course nobody would ever do. And the government, the UK government at least, mandates all parts of the government, NHS, Ministry of Defence, Home Office, police, everything, mandate that all suppliers, I'll come into supply chain stuff in a second, but all suppliers must have Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. And then in the UK, if you're a bit bigger, especially if you're a SaaS business, IT company, is ISO 27001 is pretty critical. And if you're operating in America, is SOC 2. If you're only operating in the UK and Europe, SOC 2 is pretty much a waste of time because nobody knows what it is. But the most important thing, the biggest driver that we see, and this is really our focus, is what are your customers demanding of you, right? So a lot of organizations are supplying enterprise organizations or government organizations, and it's to look at whatever they're asking for as part of their due diligence process. And usually in the UK, it'll be Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, 27001 from a security perspective. Then there's other things like quality and that sort of stuff. And what you have to remember, certifications are only one part of the puzzle. The biggest challenge, firstly, a certification is simply an assessment that on the day you were assessed, you were doing most of the things that you're supposed to do. The other 364 days, who knows, right? Same with Cyber Essentials Plus, for example, right? Cyber Essentials Plus, some ethical hacker comes along, scans your laptops to make sure you're up to date, got firewall enabled, antivirus, that sort of stuff. There's absolutely nothing stopping you as soon as at the end of that assessment, turning it all off again. Same with 27001, right? So it'd be 2-3 days, there'll be an external audit, a look at all your policies, your procedures, your evidence, all that sort of stuff. A, there's no way for them to know if you've made up the evidence. B, there's no way for them to know you're actually following the process the day after the audit. So certificates are great. It's one part of the puzzle. What's the two missing parts of the puzzles are you need to make sure you're actually doing everything that you're said you're going to do. And I think I have a bit of a problem with certifications, 100% focus on certifications because it creates the wrong mindset. So the mindset of I'm going to get this badge to win me this deal. Fine, I get that. But no number of badges or certificates are going to keep that contract in place if you lose all your customers' data because the day after the audit, you've given everybody admin access again. And no one's updated their computers until the audit next year. So it's so important to make sure that, and this is a cliche, but security is a continuous, ongoing 365 process all the time.
Just to maybe direct the conversation a little bit towards product development, a bit more specifically, It'd be great to pick your brains a bit about, Naq Cyber in terms of the process of getting that to market. And obviously, you're the co-founder, so maybe you can tell a little bit the story about, how you've got to where you are now, and what have you learned about product development during that time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can probably tell I'm pretty opinionated about the cybersecurity industry. So I've been working in it my entire career. My issue with cybersecurity is, was your first question. Whenever we speak to customers, it's always the same. I don't know what to do or where to start, is what they always say. And my biggest frustration, I remember explicitly the moment I came up with the idea for the business. I run the business with Nadia, our CEO. She's a GDPR lawyer. And I had this spark of the idea of walking around the show thinking, we're walking around InfoSec in London. And they're all these people sending that 1%, right? The technical WYSIWYG, lots of spinning globes and, lots of black and people in hoodies and that sort of stuff. And they go, well, this is all nonsense, right? What if you're a small business? You can't afford any of this. And B, what's the point spending 100 grand on a monitoring solution if you still use Windows XP. I was like, why is there nothing that like does everything an SME needs in one thing? And then I spoke to, and I think this is from terms of product development, this is the most critical part, which unfortunately a lot of people don't do. I spoke to a potential customer to understand if they have a pain. And I think that's where the company and the product came from. We looked at what is the pain our customers have. And it was always the same line. I don't know what to do or where to start. And a IT security salesperson will look at that and go, well, if you buy my endpoint protection solution, you'll be fine. Buy my firewall, buy my training course, buy my consultancy, blah, 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 you'll be fine. The truth is what they need is all of that and more. And obviously an SME can't do that. So therefore go, well, SMEs can't afford it. They need all this stuff. Therefore we'll build something that they can afford that does all that stuff. And that's where the product launch, right? And I think that's the most critical part of, because anyone who works in IT, they're experts in whatever field they're experts in. And before you put hands on keyboard, the most important thing is asking customers, I've got this idea. What do you think? What do you care about this problem? What is the main thing? And listen to them, right? Don't just go, I've got this great idea, we'll do this, this, and this. Because the answer it will go is, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting is not a validation of your idea. A validation of your idea is them sending you money and going, oh my God, where have you been all my life? Like, why is nobody doing it? Nobody else doing this? That is validation. That's the most important step. Is don't just build things in a vacuum. You see this, I see this all the time. People to go, usually it's the I've got a great idea for an app crowd. And they build this app, right? Or more accurately, they put all their life savings against some dodgy outsourced development company that shafts them to build an app according to a very poor spec with very poor designs, a terrible user interface and experience. They get the app, they test it amongst their friends and their family. Great Aunt Susie goes, oh my word, this is wonderful. Then they go, great, I'll put it on the App Store. Nothing happens. And you go, well, have you actually ever spoken to a customer? No. And you speak to a customer and go, oh, it's just like blah, blah, blah. Or why do you use that? Well, you want how much? Because you've not done that first step. And that first step is free, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is with product development, especially in startups, I think people overcomplicate what startups are. Startups are still businesses, right? The fundamental point of a startup is to build something that people are willing to pay money for. And they're willing to pay enough money that you can make more money than it costs to make that product. That's it, right? That's called profit. And that's fun. Don't overcomplicate it, right? Without that first step, you're going to fail. Especially in this climate, right? Because people hear startups, they think, oh, I'll get £1 million investment off an idea of a pitch deck. Not anymore. Those days are over. Especially in Europe. You need to have a viable business case and demonstrate that people are willing to pay money for this product.
I think particularly now as well with the rise of AI and people just leveraging that as like a no-code solution to, I've got an idea, let me get ChatGPT Plus to write out me the code for it and bring it to market and bang, done.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that, the term, it's all the lean startup methodology, right? Minimum viable product. And our minimum viable product at the beginning, I'm not embarrassed to say this.
Actually, so I'm keen to.
Yeah, our solution was, here's all the stuff that SMEs need to be secure and compliant. We've changed our messaging slightly now, but our focus now is supply chain due diligence. But at the beginning, everything SMEs need to be secure and compliant. Another thing, the security is people, processes, technology. So there's training, processes, so GDPR and security, and then technology, IT security stuff, in that order. As obviously I alluded before, train your team, have the right processes, and then do IT security at the end. And I'm like, okay, I haven't got the time to build an app. So what we did, I built a WordPress training website. Yes, we're a security company using WordPress, but don't hold that against me. Were.
That's right.
Yeah. There's a training website, built some training courses, put that on the website. And then one of these, there's loads of training templates. Use Webflow though now. It's much more secure, or Squarespace or something. Then processes. So Nadia is a lawyer, GDPR lawyer. So for each of our new customers, she used to write each set of documents by hand for each customer, which took a lot of time. I think she got it down to 3 days per customer, which is impressive. So whenever a GDPR lawyer quotes you for 3 weeks, remember that. And then technology, right? So, okay, well, basically advice, all the basics I mentioned. We used to do some other stuff. And then every month I used to send them a PowerPoint report that was what the dashboard would have been, with their overall security score, their top actions, and blah, 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 status, and that sort of thing. And we did that for a number of months and sold it to a few customers to validate the idea that people are willing to pay this amount of money, an amount of money for this sort of product. And then what happened, we got a grant. If you're in the UK, my single biggest piece of advice for all startups, pay somebody to get a Innovate UK grant, right? Don't bother doing it yourself. You will fail. Pay somebody to get Innovate UK grant. Anyway, so we were part of the National Cybersecurity Centre Accelerator. Out of them, we got a small grant that then enabled us to basically turn this PowerPoint report into an app, so a web app. We were still doing, I call it the duck release, because it's or the swan release, I should say. It's very elegant on the top, but underneath we're still manic, right? So we're still writing the policies from scratch. I was still, scanning websites, using Kali Linux, manually. Got rid of the training courses on WordPress, thankfully. And then basically all we did, our product mentality now is, what are we doing manually now? Let's automate that. And now our product development approach is pretty simple, is what are we doing manually? What are our customers doing manually that we could automate? And that's our development process going forward now. And that's why we are, obviously, anyone listening to this has or will have an API integration with GPT-4, else you're never going to raise money ever again if you don't use conversational AI in your product. But that's why we are doing things like that, because customers are still asking us questions like, MOD has asked me about what do I do for encryption at rest, for example, right? That's a perfect thing for a conversational AI trained on our policies and trained on their data. Or big thing is customers we have to fill out for our customers due diligence questionnaires, had to, and then generate a tool to generate those answers, that sort of thing. And then now we're very automated, and I think, but all what it starts with, and we still do this today, is what pain is our customer experiencing now that we can solve with technology, if it needs solving with technology. And that's always should be your core focus, is not what are our competitors doing that we're not doing. That's not what you should be doing, because it might be that your competitor has a feature that would cost you enormous amounts of time, money, and effort that your customers don't care about. Perfectly reasonable. So it always should be, what do your customers care about? Ask them, what are the top 3 features you love the best? What top 3 features you don't like? What are the top 3 things that you wish it had in an ideal world?
That reminds me of the last podcast episode I recorded, actually, with Mike Migliore, who's a lifetime value expert. And he echoed your sense of keeping an eye on what the competitors are doing. But from his perspective, it was about either doing things better than they are or more cheaply. But I think you make a really good point about the fact of, if it doesn't solve a problem to begin with, then you shouldn't even be doing it, even if you can do it more cheaply. So yeah, I definitely I agree with you there. I think the other thing that Mike also discussed was around his definition of what a great product is, and he mentioned the idea of something that solves a problem. And I think very much you're aligned on that side for sure.
Absolutely, and it has to be, right. And I think when you look at every successful business, it does need to be a grand problem, right? I'm sure during your podcast series, this name is going to be mentioned a lot, but Elon Musk said.
At least it's not Steve Jobs.
Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, yeah, exactly. or Winston Churchill. Elon Musk said it has to solve a problem or make somebody's life a bit better. And it could be an entertainment thing or a trivial thing that makes people's lives a little bit better. Whether that's fun, whether that's easier, cheaper, whatever. And it's so important. But the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, is really important. I think we look at our competitors all the time, which is super important. But you also have to look at it and go, well, what are they doing? What's their traction? What's their messaging? All that sort of stuff. But it's really easy to focus too much on what your competitors are doing. And I think I'm going to use another name and people are going to say, Jeff Bezos says, is a relentless focus on your customer and the customer experience. And you should keep an eye on what they're doing. I mean, his competitor was bookshops, right? Because his competitor was Waterstones, say, oils. What are they doing? What do people love about their product? What do people hate about their product? Feed that into your development, but don't go, it's very easy to do this, certainly in startup land. Blah de blah just raised 100 million, 10 million. This will happen, right? Blah de blah competitors just raised loads of money. Oh my God, we're screwed, right? Don't do that. Focus on what do our customers like. And if you're losing deals to competitors, then you need to still ask that question. Don't copy a competitor. Speak to a customer and go, if someone says, look, I'm moving over to blah de blah, you ask them why. And they go, because it's cheaper, because it's faster, because it's better. But start with the customer. And it even could be not a product feature. And that's the important thing. It could be their customer experience is better. It could be they're cheaper. It could be better payment terms. Because, I don't know, they give me a free mug or something, right? I don't know. Whatever it is, don't just code in a vacuum without speaking to customers. And I'm very passionate about this, every single product feature in Jira or whatever must be associated with a customer request. And the two biggest sources of product features, in my opinion, are salespeople and support people. Because salespeople are trying to do demos all the day, and they'll go, and I see this, right? Sometimes eyes light up when I talk about certain feature. And we different things, different people. And support people, they basically know what's broken, or their customers come back, because support people just get grief, right? Nobody emails support going, your product's amazing. I just wanted to let you know. It never happens. It's like, where's this? How do I find this? Blah, blah, blah. And those are the two biggest sources of product features for your app. And another thing about product features as well is this is very difficult. Don't build things because you think it'll impress VCs. And you saw this last year with Web3, right? And you're seeing it a bit now with conversational AI. Anyone who knows anything last year went, why are you using why are you using a blockchain? Why not use a database? Right? What do you mean you pay £10,000 for a picture of a monkey?
Yeah, decentralized buzzword, isn't it?
Yeah. But just again, it has to start with, and any VC will sit up and notice if you're delivering something that customers love, because that means inevitably there'll be increasing revenue. And that's especially important for the buzzy stuff like AI and things. Only do that if it solves a customer pain.
I really like your point about the MVP as a PM in particular. I know how easy it is to be sucked into that sense of I want to over-deliver or over-engineer solutions, I guess. So I really like the approach you took in terms of taking that PowerPoint dashboard and doing that manual process and turning that into something automated as part of your roadmap. But first of all, proving out that it actually is solving a problem and is something that the customer will want as well. I think that's a really important point to make.
Yeah, my biggest inspiration for that was Airbnb, actually. So Airbnb, and Deliveroo did the same as well. I think for Airbnb, the founders were going around to people's homes, taking the photographs, putting those listings online and sending the payments through manually. It's basically a website, right? Their product was non-existent. Like it was just a website with pictures on it and inquire, send a contact form. That's it,
Yeah.
right? And Deliveroo, I think the founders delivered the food. I think
Yeah, I think so
they
too. I
literally had a
remember that story.
website and they went to the restaurant, got the food themselves, delivered it to a customer. And that's nothing, right? That's literally some pictures on a website and then buy, right? With a Stripe integration that takes 5 minutes. But it's so important to and this is I mentioned grants, but you got to be careful with grant money as well, because if you get 200 grand grant money, you get a team of 15 developers, you build something, and you don't need to go and speak to customers, and you can pretend you've got a business. And I've seen this a lot, especially in security. Actually, people then build something, they run out of grant money, and then they'll do either one or two things. They'll go to a VC asking for 3 million when they have no business plan, no customers, no revenue. Or they'll go to customers and go, here's our product. Or what they'll do is put it on the website and hopefully customers will magically come to them somehow. And then they realize, oh, nobody wants our product that we just spent loads of money on. And then you got a team of 15 people, right? You think you're a startup founder, but you're not. You're running a research department. Even if you have money, and this is probably most important, even if you have investment, you have grants, you have, capital from somewhere else, it's still critical to do that first step. So you don't squander that money doing the wrong thing. And I think you've also seen that in the past 12 months where people spent money on the wrong thing, on vanity projects, on hiring the wrong people for certain roles because they thought that's what it required, and they lost sight of the true purpose of any product development team is to build something that makes people's lives better, and that's it. That's all a business is.
I'm sure there's a company tagline with that particular phrase, but Microsoft or something like that. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah. Making. Why is it making life? Isn't it Tesco? No.
Yeah, Sky's believing better, I think, but yeah.
Oh, believe me, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In terms of moving forward, then, as a kind of final thought, both in terms of cybersecurity, but also you as a co-founder and kind of focusing on developing your own product. Where's the next sort of 5 years looking for you in cybersecurity, and what should people be aware of, I suppose, in the next few years?
I've given the same answer for the past 13 years. An obvious answer here is to say APTs and AI and all that sort of stuff. Will that have an impact? Maybe. I think AI, what I mean by AI is conversational large language models will make it a bit easier to create convincing scams and phishing emails. But again, the biggest problem is lack of budget in security departments, lack of awareness and care for security. And the biggest problem in security is people will spend money on the wrong things and not on stuff we mentioned, the basics. And the thing is, and it's only getting worse the more complex our IT environments become. People aren't doing the very basics. And it's so important to put a focus on that, especially as our time becomes more and more limited, because the biggest threat to cybersecurity is not enough people who work in cybersecurity. There is such an enormous shortage of security talent across the board, whether it's penetration testing, whether it's consultancy, whether it's architecture, analysts, and the attacks are becoming more and more common because it's easier and easier to launch. And as I said earlier, cyber attacks are really easy. I could launch a ransomware campaign in 20 minutes. It's not hard, right? Without coding anything. The way they execute those attacks is through lack of awareness, training, blah, blah. Is not the sexy stuff. And I think that's really the focus. That's really my thing. It's not very sexy things to close on, I suppose, but and in terms of product development, for me personally, is again sticking to our core mantra of what do our customers demand? What are our customers asking for? Not what is buzzy, not what VCs are mentioning. Is going what is the pain our customers experiencing, and then doing more of that and less of the stuff that they don't care about.
I suppose human drivers, they're the same that they were for the most part decades ago, fundamentally, us as humans. And technology as a layer, it's kind of represented in different ways, and maybe some of those things are solved in different ways, but fundamentally, what are the problems? How do we solve it? And it sounds like if you're focusing on the now and you keep focusing on the now, that's the important thing. Because in the future, you fix the human issues, you fix everything else there in terms of culture, let's say, in the company and whatever else, then you're in a good position moving forward regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll never get to the end state. There'll never be a time where there's no security industry. If I had the limited IT security budget as I was an organization, I would spend 90% of it on training and awareness and even policies, and then the final 10% on IT security.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to finish on. I think a good recommendation for companies to take on board. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's been lovely.
Great. Where can people find you if they want to follow up about yourself or Naq Cyber in particular?
Yeah, so naqcyber.com, NAQ cyber, CYBR.com. In case anyone's wondering, Naq is Klingon for complete.
There we go.
So I didn't want to call it complete cyber. That's boring. Naq Cyber. So there you go. It's a very nerdy name.
The full nerd has been released.
Absolutely. I'm sure your audience will appreciate that. But naqcyber.com, and you can reach out to us there.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Adam. Thanks. Cheerio.
You've been listening to the Product Development Podcast, and I've been your host, Adam Wakeling. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to give it a follow on your preferred podcast platform and leave a review. It's really appreciated and helps the podcast reach more people.